It's time to talk about the third phase. Will LSU's special teams be special again? Here we go. It's Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We have spent so much time talking about offense, defense, the offensive line, the defensive depth, Nussmeier's tendinitis in his patellar. We have talked about receiver depth. We have talked about so much. We have not yet spent enough time talking about special teams. And thankfully, when Brian Kelly met with reporters on Tuesday after practice, a good line of the questioning was angled and geared toward how LSU is coming along in the third phase. Now, remember, since Brian Kelly has been here, special teams has been a bugaboo. And it's actually been one of the bigger complaints that LSU fans have had, in that they have not had a dedicated special teams coordinator. Remember, in year one, Brian Kelly, when he came here, he brought Brian Polian in, and Polian was serving a dual role and worked with the special teams, but it wasn't a dedicated special teams coordinator role. And then in 2023, John Jancic was going to hold that role, and then there was all the staff shuffling that went on, and you ended up having Bob Diaco as an analyst work in that role as well. And then in 2024, Slade Nagel had the title, but Diaco was kind of the guy who was running all the periods, and it was just a lot of ambiguity. Well, this offseason, Brian Kelly went and brought in Aman Anand from Grambling. And before you roll your eyes and laugh, Aman Anand has been at some major programs. He's been at Penn State, and he has been at Memphis, and he has been at some key programs and been a special teams guru everywhere he's been. And in the FCS a year ago, Grambling was arguably the best in the country at special teams. And there's a little bit of an asterisk here because Aman Anand is a great example of what the current rules in college athletics allow for and how teams are going to benefit. So, for example, remember, you're only allowed 10 full-time on-field assistants. And so for years, that was a major problem because those were the only coaches that could coach on the field. Analysts, remember, could only work with the coaches. They could coach the coaches in off the field in meeting rooms. Well, with the new rule, there's no limit. Analysts can coach on the field. And so you can have as many analysts as you want and assign them to whatever role you want. So Aman Anand is an analyst, but he is the special teams coordinator. There is no ambiguity. You go out to practice, and that is the dude running all the special teams periods. And Brian Kelly was asked on Tuesday when he met with reporters about Aman Anand, and he gave a long, detailed, fantastic answer. And this could be the jumping off point for all the different things I want to talk about with special teams today.
I think Aman is, very bright. I think he breaks special teams down to its fundamental form. Many coordinators that I've had at the position, were much more unit driven, meaning, you send your 11 guys out on punt and then you work on punt. Or you send your 11 guys out on kickoff return and all you do is kickoff return. We're much more in pods where we're working the right up back and the left up back, or we're just working the wall, or we're just working the gunners on techniques. And it's really resonated with our players in the sense that they really feel like they're being coached from a technical standpoint, and then bring the unit in and let them execute together as 1/11th. So in answering your question, I think he's done an incredibly great job of utilizing the entire coaching staff. So everybody's involved, the entire coaching staff's involved, and really breaking it down to its details. Then plug in some playmakers, right? Barion or Aeron and, obviously Ramos and Aeron Burrell, they all become now better because we're so much more technically sound in all those areas.
Technically sound and plug in the playmakers. There's a couple of things I'm so glad Brian Kelly talked about, using the entire staff. I want to give you an example. So when we were at practice on Monday, I was standing, they were at the indoor facility. When the media gets to watch, there's a catwalk. And so the media goes up to the catwalk. And so we watch the practice from up there. And the offense, so I'm standing right about midfield, and the offense is down to my right, running their scout drills. And right about midfield, in a lot of the individual, it's exactly what Brian Kelly said. There were pods. And so it was the snappers and the holders. And I noticed Eric Held. Now, you may not remember this, but we talked about it when he got hired. But Eric Held, who was a special teamer in college at Nichols, Brother Martin in New Orleans, went to Nichols, played with Frank Wilson at Nichols, and then was a longtime high school coach in Louisiana, was the head coach at St. Michael's. He was assistant at Catholic High, and was the head of the Louisiana Coaches Association most recently. And Brian Kelly hired Held to be sort of the liaison between the high school football coaches and programs and that relationship with the LSU football program. It's a very important role. Well, again, it's another guy who's able to coach on the field because there's no limit to those things. Well, Held with a very detailed special teams background. I was standing at the catwalk, and I was standing next to Michael Koppel from WBRZ, and I said, look at Held working with the snap. It was the snappers, the holders. But it was just an illustration of what Brian Kelly was describing there. So you have everybody on the staff at your disposal, but there's no question who the guy is. Like, Aman Anand is the guy. He's the special teams coordinator, and all the different coaches are working on some of the nuances that Brian Kelly's talking about to be more technical and more fundamentally sound, which I think is a really gigantic benefit there. Now, one of the other things that I think is so important to remember is how much ground LSU has to make up in this phase. In Brian Kelly's first year, so there's something called a special teams efficiency ranking. And you can go unit by unit, look at field goal percentage or net punting or kickoff returns and all that sort of stuff. And you could look at where you fall. But there's a metric that takes all the special teams units, throws them into one pile, and spits out an efficiency rating, how good you are as a whole in special teams. So take it for what it's worth. But in 2022, Brian Kelly's first year, LSU was 122nd in special teams efficiency. 122 out of 134. They were awful. In 2023, they improved, but slightly up to 75. Still awful. Last year, they jumped up to 37. Now, a big part of that, remember, is at the end of the season, both Aeron Anderson and Zavion Thomas returned kickoffs for touchdowns in both the Oklahoma game and in the bowl game against Baylor. Damian Ramos has been incredibly consistent as place kicker. Aaron Burrell is just a touchback machine on kickoffs. Where you really struggled a year ago, obviously, was punting. With Blake Oxendorf and with Peyton Todd, you were one of the worst in the conference as far as net punting. And then also you had issues with the operation on field goal PAT, snap, hold, placement, kick. Wasn't always Ramos's fault. And I mean, there were plenty of times where Brian Kelly was getting in Peyton Todd's ear coming off the sideline about the lack of the operation, because timing of that operation matters so much. Well, all that is new now. Jonathan Ferguson is the new snapper. You're replacing Slade Roy. Brian Kelly's going to tell you, I'm going to play this sound before you in just a quick second, about who's the holder. But remember, Peyton Todd was the holder, so you're replacing Peyton Todd. So you have a new snapper, new holder, but Ramos is back, and he's been the place kicker all 3 seasons that Brian Kelly has been here. So you have consistency there. Burrell's back as your place kicker. You brought in Grant Chadwick as your punter from Middle Tennessee, and then my goodness, did you bring in talent in the return game, which we're going to get to as we continue. We're dedicating this episode to special teams, and I want to dive a little deeper into the personnel, because what Brian Kelly said, yes, the staff is working. They're working in pods. They're technically better, but he talked about the playmakers. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the playmakers on special teams. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes. You can see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. We're also brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, man, Open Phone could be incredibly helpful for you and your business. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale customer communications. Maybe your whole team sharing one number, responding to customers like a shared inbox would be helpful. No more who's handling this. And they have an AI agent that handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you'll never miss a customer again. See why more than 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. And they're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That's openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port over to your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. So we talked about a good bit there, the technical nature of what Brian Kelly is building here with this special teams unit. Well, what about what they have with the personnel, as Brian Kelly said, the playmakers? Let's start with kind of an obvious one here. As Brian Kelly was asked about punter, if there's competition right now at the punter position for LSU.
There's no competition at the punting position, but we are really pleased with Aeron Burrell's progress. Chadwick has been really good all camp. And it goes to what I said earlier about flipping the field. We think he's going to be able to do that for us. But Aaron's done a really good job in that position. Holder, Grant's the holder right now, but we do have Colin Hurley working at it and Bauer Sharp, who did it as well. So we have 3 guys that we're working and getting reps to on a regular basis. Okay,
so Grant Chadwick is your holder. Bauer Sharp, Colin Hurley working there. It's interesting because we've also seen Badger Hargett at times hold. Now, Badger Hargett is the walk-on punter who's certainly not going to factor into the season this year. But it's interesting. So remember, Bauer Sharp was a quarterback who moved to tight end. So he's done that before. And, of course, attempted a pass on a fake for Oklahoma last year in Tiger Stadium, which was intercepted, but might give you that variation and the possibility of a fake. Same with Colin Hurley, who can throw the ball in that situation as well. So, but Grant Chadwick has been outstanding. Chadwick was awesome last year at Middle Tennessee and was one of the top punters in the portal for this cycle, and LSU needed an upgrade there. I mean, Brian Kelly didn't mince words whenever he talked about Peyton Todd needing to improve. Didn't do it. They brought in Blake Oxendorf last year. They were bad at net punting, and so they went and got Grant Chadwick from Middle Tennessee, who averaged 43 yards per punt. I had 21 punts inside the 20-yard line, and that's a guy at 6'5" who booms the football and is undeniable that you are better there in that capacity. We've also seen a lot of rugby-style punting as well here as they've tried to maybe angle kick toward the sideline or pin opponents deep. So something to keep an eye on is they do factor in the rugby style. Now, the thing that I think more people are going to be interested in is the return game. Like, we know the specialists are. Ramos is your place kicker. Aeron Burrell is going to kick off. Chadwick is going to punt. Ferguson's going to snap, and you just heard him say there, Chadwick very likely is going to be the holder. So we know who those specialists are. What about the returners? I want to remind you that if you go back to Brian Kelly's first game as the coach at LSU, special teams were a nightmare. Of not only just the blocked PAT at the end of the game when LSU was trying to force overtime against Florida State, but remember, there were 2 muffed punts in that game by Malik Neighbors. And it is stunning to think because for, 3 decades, LSU never struggled to find someone fast and athletic who could catch the ball and run. I mean, go back to Todd Kinchin or Eddie Kennison, and then Kevin Falk and Rondell Mealy, and my goodness, Dominic Davis or Skylar Green, Odell Beckham Jr., Patrick Peterson, my goodness, Tyrann Mathieu. Just run down the list, DJ Chark. They've never been at a lack for fast, athletic dudes that could return the football. And then Malik Neighbors muffed 2 against Florida State, and LSU was having such trouble finding someone who could just field a punt that they ended up putting Gregory Clayton back there, a walk-on wide receiver, just to catch it. I mean, as soon as the ball left the punter's foot, fair catch signal, just catch the ball. That's all they were asking. I mean, it went to a virtual 0 in the return game. It started to turn a year ago. Obviously, it was Zavion Thomas, who was an outstanding kick returner in his freshman season at Mississippi State. And then with Aeron Anderson as well, who also has that dynamic ability. As we mentioned, each returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Anderson against Oklahoma, Zavion Thomas in the bowl game against Baylor. And if you go back to the opening kickoff of the season last year, literally the opening kickoff of the season against USC, Zavion Thomas was a shoestring tackle away from breaking the opening kickoff of the season for a touchdown. And now you've added Barion Brown. Barion Brown holds the SEC career record for kickoff returns for a touchdown with 5 in his 3 years at Kentucky. He might be the most dynamic of all of them. As I understand it, Zavion Thomas is likely going to be the first punt returner with Barion Brown behind him. And you better believe Barion Brown's going to be back there returning kickoffs. But Brian Kelly did mince words when he talked about the return game and the ability there.
You punt it to us, we want to return that son of a gun every single time. I will tell you that we are working diligently with the knowledge that we have game breakers. We know that they can flip the field. Look, and this isn't to bash anybody, right? But you watched us play. We very rarely, other than a couple of returns, which we had, we didn't flip the field with our feet. In other words, we didn't flip the field very often with the punt game. We need to flip the field and put the pressure on offenses. And we didn't do a very good job of that last year. So as much as it is about returns, we got to flip the field too. And then let our defense get the ball back for our offense on a short field. Those are some of the things we're really focused on.
The third phase is something that LSU has really struggled in under Brian Kelly. And for a lot of reasons that we talked about at the beginning, that's created fan angst, not having a dedicated special teams coordinator, maybe not having the right people. Well, you fixed that. Remember, Jay Bramblett was outstanding. He was the punter that came with Brian Kelly from Notre Dame and actually steadied that one phase of special teams. And quite honestly, Damian Ramos has been really good. In 2022, he was 55 of 57 on extra points. Of course, that fateful extra point that was blocked against Florida State. But he made 71% of his field goals that first year. In 2023, Damian Ramos was perfect. 77 of 77 on PATs and made 80% of his field goals. He was 12 of 15. And then last year, he was 41 of 42 on his PATs, and he was 23 of 29 for 79% from field goal. Like, NFL kickers are better than 80% on field goals. So the fact that Damian Ramos at 80, 79 right there, incredibly accurate and consistent, and what a luxury to have him returning. And Brian Kelly also mentioned earlier this offseason that they have all these analytics, and so they can measure, like, basically what amounts like exit velocity, right? Like what you would account for exit velocity for baseball. Same thing with the kickers. And said Damian Ramos has added that exit velo to his kicks, and he's actually added some distance, and he's good from 53, 55 now. So you might even see a little more distance opportunity there with Damian Ramos. So we know about the coaches, the fundamentals. We know about the talent in the return game. There's one other component about this LSU roster that is going to be exceptionally beneficial for special teams. And I'll explain it by letting Brian Kelly first answer a different question when we come back. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. August the 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Maybe you love Joey B like I do to win the MVP this year. Crown your champion. I love the Bengals. I think this is the year that Joe Burrow gets it done. He was the best player in the NFL last year. Or parlay your division winner, dark horses. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel. Play your game. Brian Kelly was asked about the depth on the defensive line. And unknowingly, his answer about the depth on the defensive line actually, I believe, is going to be proof why LSU is going to be so much better on special teams. I'll explain what I mean, but first, Brian Kelly's answer about the depth on the defensive line.
I certainly love the depth, right, that we really haven't had over the first 3 years. You know, we're able to rotate guys in competitive situations, whether it's at the edge, defensive tackle, linebacker, safety, and corner. Those were positions that we were just trying to get 11 out there. And you can't really get a competitive environment when you're so thin there. And, you know, through the roster management and development, both in terms of guys developing in the program and the portal, has put us in a much better position where we can start to see that depth is paying off in practice.
Okay. Now, Brian Kelly talking about defensive depth is something that maybe on its face doesn't feel like it would make a big deal for special teams, but consider this. When you have super talented dudes that are sitting on the sideline, those super talented dudes end up playing and affecting the game mostly on special teams. For example, a year ago, LSU in the secondary was so thin. In the opener against USC, you had Sage Ryan playing boundary corner. You had true freshman P.J. Woodland taking significant reps for you. And P.J. Woodland's made tremendous progress this year, I'm not saying it. But again, like as a true freshman out there, Deshaun Spears is a true freshman playing significant snaps against USC in that opener. You understand my point? You were so thin. Now consider the fact that A.J. Halsey, TaMarcus Cooley are probably your starting safeties. Deshaun Spears and Javen Toviano are back there as well. That's 4 deep at safety. We haven't even mentioned Jordan Gilbert. Does Jordan Gilbert go play special teams? So a fifth-year player who's played in almost 50 career games is going to be helping you on special teams? That's a dramatic improvement over maybe a true freshman who's seen his first action ever. We talk about the defensive line. I mean, think about how thin you are, especially after Jacobian Guillory went down last year. Jacobian Guillory goes down, and you're rotating on the defensive line with Gio Paez moving inside. Paris Shand had to move inside. You're playing freshman Ahmad Bro, who signed as a defensive end. Now he's playing defensive tackle. Dom McKinley wasn't even available until at the midseason. Your first 2 defensive ends are really good in Swinson and Zavion Jones. But after that, like the next guy up was Deshaun Womack, who couldn't stop the run, and then a freshman in Gabe Relaford. Now, a guy like Patrick Payton, who's got 36 career TFLs, is on the second team at defensive end. So now you've got guys who are really athletically gifted, like a Kalaj Cobbins, who can help you on special teams. The point, CJ Jim Coyley looks like an Adonis. He's a true freshman who is, people are going to love to see this guy play. But if you weren't as deep as you are with Harold Perkins coming back, and then Jordan Gilbert is your number 2 star, and then Jim Coyley is your number 3 star right now, linebacker, he's going to help you on special teams. That's what depth gives you. When you have great depth on the defensive side, it means you're going to be better on special teams because you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel to field your special teams units. You have guys that a year ago might have been starting for you, playing on special teams units now, which is going to make you better across the board. So it's a far cry from where LSU was when Brian Kelly showed up, when they were 122nd in the country in special teams efficiency rating, when Brian Polian was running that unit, and Gregory Clayton was just running out there fair, catching everything just so you could field a punt and not lose possession. Well, it's going to be a different reality. You heard Brian Kelly talking about using our feet to flip the field. That's in the return game, and that's obviously punting the football. That's in the return game in punts and in kickoffs, and then in kick returns and punt returns, and then obviously your ability to defend in special teams because you are going to be fast and athletic. This is the deepest team Brian Kelly's had. It's the most talented team Brian Kelly's had, and it's a team that most certainly will be able to affect the game in the third phase in special teams in large part thanks to the attention to detail. Finally, having a dedicated special teams coordinator like Aman Anand in place to make LSU even better in the third phase. Okay, y'all, that's going to do it for us here in today's episode of Locked on LSU. Thanks for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check out the portal on podcast or YouTube. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Let a friend know. If they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day.